of the way. Here we go. We are all yours, Reverend James.
All right. Well, thank you. I'd like to begin by taking some time to enter into a deeper awareness of the divine presence that is everywhere, including in every part of us. And so I invite you to take a few moments to enter into that space more deeply, to relax, find a comfortable position. Begin by relaxing, relax, let go. Peace, be still. Feel the connection of your breath with the atmosphere that surrounds the earth, that is breathed by and supports the life of every living creature. Even in this simple and basic life rhythm of breath, we are intimately connected. There is no separation. There is one presence. That presence, that we might call it energy or life, that beingness, that consciousness is only one. Each of us is intimately connected with that one, infinite being, infinite consciousness, infinite life. When we think of this infinity, we recognize that none of our words truly and fully describe this reality. So we find it through experience. We find it through moving our attention inward first into the body with our breathing, and then even more inwardly to our feeling nature, our thoughts. We become the observers and at the same time that which is observed. Each of us sharing in the universal consciousness, each of us an expression of the infinite one, one with the infinite one. And because this one is limitless, we realize that all things are possible with God. All things are possible with this infinite mind, spirit, life being, indescribable one. All things are possible. In the awareness that all things are possible, we choose to direct our attention to those possibilities we wish to experience and to express. So as you look more deeply inward, look at possibilities that are available to you, possibilities that you would experience and express. Possibilities of peace, joy, bliss, possibilities of love, possibilities of creativity and expression, wisdom, understanding, and light, possibilities of greater energy and strength. What are the possibilities that you choose now in this moment? Possibilities that are at the very core and reality of your being the being of the one, no separation. That which you can conceive and believe you can achieve. I invite each one now, focus your attention completely and fully and deeply into some possibility that you would experience, whether it's a healing, guidance, new creativity, whatever it may be. Let that emerge into your awareness. Accept it as yours and focus your full attention, that divine possibility, in silence. Now, in a consciousness of divine love, we support each of those possibilities in each other. We support the full experience and expression of those divine possibilities. We accept those possibilities as realities, knowing that these realities are now unfolding in us, through us, all around us. This consciousness of love, in this consciousness of faith, in this consciousness of knowing and acceptance. We rejoice, we are grateful, we give thanks. Consciousness of the one divine presence. So it is. Amen. Well, it's good to be back with you all. Um, I want to begin with a few remarks on the idea of religion, faith, or I should say the ideas of religion, faith, and spiritual path, what those are and what they have in common, what the differences are. Religion consists of doctrines, practices, rituals, and participation in a religious community. That's a fairly general description that really applies to anything that is regarded as a religion. Doctrines, practices, rituals, participation in a religious community. We sometimes call a religion a faith. Well, faith implies belief in a particular worldview. In that sense, there really isn't that much difference between a religion and a faith. However, some people have no particular religious affiliation and still have faith in God. They may have faith in the universe. They may have faith in astrology or fate, but they have faith. They believe in something. And so we could say that every religious person has faith, but not every person who has faith is religious. And so we can draw the distinction. Now, a spiritual path is a way of living and becoming more conscious of spiritual reality. An individual's path might involve religious affiliation, but it might not. An individual's spiritual path might involve faith in something, but it might be more of a quest for truth, a quest that leads to spiritual realization. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were on a spiritual path that led them to have faith, that led them to become healers and to found a spiritual school, an organization. And this is the way they looked at it. They named it a school, the Unity School, the Unity Society. The Unity School perpetuates a spiritual path teaching. It's a teaching that can lead to healing, to health. It's a teaching that can lead to happiness, and ultimately to spiritual experiences. Unity does not fit the conventional notions of what a religion is. It is a spiritual teaching that does not promote a dogmatic and ritualistic religion. We have, in various forms, rituals, but these are not really the core or not necessarily even universal. Sometimes they're very individual sorts of rituals, but it's not, and the point is, it's not dogmatic. From the beginning, the teachings of Jesus were at the core of unity teachings, but unity does not really fit into conventional traditional ideas of what Christianity is supposed to be, or supposed to be by um, other Christians, I guess you could say, or other religious scholars or thinkers. Unity teachings are like those, very much like those found in the Christian mystical tradition, but without so much connection to dogmatic theology and traditional rituals and organization. Still, we have this commonality with the mysticism of Christianity and the mysticism of other faiths. As you celebrate every week here at Unity Center in Montreal. Unity is a spiritual path that does not require or exclude affiliation with Christianity or Buddhism or Judaism or Hinduism or any other ism. We do not require or exclude affiliation with any of these, anyone, regardless of affiliations or gender or ethnicity or sexual orientation. Anyone and everyone is welcome in unity. Anyone can take what they find valuable and useful from unity teachings and disregard the rest. Unity is fundamentally a metaphysical system and a mystical path. Mysticism paths, as I said, are found in many religions: Christianity, Islamic Sufism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism. Each path uses meditation and seeks an experience of unity or union with a transcendent spiritual reality. Some call that reality God, others call it nirvana. But whatever they call it, they speak of it in the same ways. They use this practice of meditation that has much, each form of meditation has much in common with the others. The ultimate state of this aimed for in this path is a kind of dissolving of ordinary consciousness, individualistic consciousness, consciousness of separation, the dissolving of that into a pure consciousness of oneness, a pure consciousness of love and bliss. Well, these are some of the ways that mystics describe the experience, and yet mystics agree that this experience and this reality is ultimately beyond description in words. This is what the spiritual path of mysticism leads to, this pure consciousness of love, oneness, and bliss. Spiritual paths followed by mystics of the world have usually been affiliated with particular religions. Some mystics have been rejected by the religions that they were connected with. Some mystics founded new religions rather than affiliating with an older religion. So mysticism doesn't have any really strong connection, I guess the point I would make, a strong connection with this or that religion, or even necessarily with any religion. But some mystics, especially in the 19th century or since the 19th century, have followed more of an inner guided, self-reliant spiritual path without associating with a particular religion. In a way, the mysticism of the last few centuries has been more like the mysticism of those who have founded religions rather than those who have followed them. We find this type of self-reliant mystic in the history of philosophy. People such as Pythagoras and Plotinus, and even the 20th century British philosopher F.H. Bradley. We find this non-religious type of mystic in the company of those called transcendentalists. We find this type of mystic traveling in unity, new thought, and new age circles. So I see unity in this way as a spiritual path, a mystical path. And I see it as having three phases. And I emphasize that word phases, not levels. There's not a judgment of what level someone might be at involved here or what step they might be involved in, but phases, different phases in which we participate. So those three phases that I'll be talking about are one phase is practical metaphysics, another I'll describe as esoteric studies, and the third as God consciousness, which is sort of, again, the goal of mysticism. So there's these three phases, not levels. We may be interacting in any different phase at any given point in our experience, any way, any part along the path. Unity seeks God. And our idea of God is, again, the mystical idea of God. And we'll return to that point in the final lesson in the series. We should not be hesitant to use the word God, as long as we understand that our idea of God is not the idea of a conventional, non mystical religion. In unity, we learn to use this word God without conjuring up an idea of a supernatural entity separate from the universe or separate from us. We think in a very real way of the universe as God or as God emanation, and also of God as more than the physical universe. So we have something in common with pantheism, I suppose, which is sort of the belief that God is nature. Right? We're more of what's called panentheists. We believe in a God that is nature and is more than nature. So let's get back to this first phase, practical metaphysics. The first phase in unity, practical metaphysics, is coping, usually is coping with life challenges. I call this the first phase, but I did not mean it necessarily as a foundational or entry point. People can enter into this from different phases. It is first in the sense of operating at the level of everyday experience. The practical metaphysics, what the Fillmores call practical Christianity, is probably the entry point for most people in unity. It's not a phase that you leave behind, but rather one that you continue to work with in everyday life. This phase, like the others, can become more effective, broader, deeper over time. Not everyone begins the unity, spiritual, mystical path at the practical metaphysics phase. Right? That phase does not end when you move into the other phases. And this is true of unity as a spiritual path, and it's true of some other spiritual paths that we find in the world. For example, the Eightfold Path in Buddhism is not a path that you follow step by step. It is a path in which you are always involved in and developing those different folds or unfolding those different folds, like the petals of a lotus. Right? The yogic path is the same thing. There's 8 limbs of yoga, but it's not necessarily a process of following step 1, step 2, step 3 down to step 8, but being involved in at various times all of those different limbs of yoga. Unities like that are phases, if you will, are like that. You can be involved in any and all at any given moment. Now, many people come into unity through finding daily word, okay, or calling silent unity, or by invitation from a friend. Many people try unity or try unity teachings to cope with specific life challenges. This is the sort of practical metaphysics level. This is, or phase, I should say. This is the phase that I entered into unity. I want to talk a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about what my path has been, even though I really don't like talking about myself, if I'm being completely honest. But I feel like I need to somehow illustrate this And I just know my path more than, better than I know anyone else's. And so I just use these as examples to sort of indicate or unfold what I mean by these different phases of the path. So my path on unity really began at the level of practical metaphysics when I was in my early 20s. Um, I had a variety of experiences in this early phase of my path. I was um, I began to work with ideas, and I didn't actually initially enter this path with a unity teaching. It was soon after that I found it. I had been I had had a what you call a chronic dermatological virus. It wasn't a serious condition. It was just an annoying one because it was I had it for years and years. And I had I had been in Christian Science Sunday school from the time I was like um, really kind of a little kid through high school, and then I just found ultimately it wasn't satisfying. But in my research, I read about this person named Quimby, right, who's often regarded as sort of the founder of New Thought. And so I got curious, and I got a hold of a copy of the Quimby manuscripts, and I started to read them and study them. And the Christian Science teachings had never, for some whatever reason, had never really clicked with me. I always found these different sort of things that I thought of as logical holes or sort of historical dimensions of it that I found sort of um, unappealing. Anyway, at any rate, I thought, well, I'll look into what the Quimby manuscripts have to say, see what this guy had to say. And it was during the study of these manuscripts that I began to have some insights about the nature of mind, belief, illness, and healing, right, from Quimby's teachings. The main thing I got was that when we direct our attention to a condition, we give it power, we reinforce it. We and so this is what I realized. This is what I was doing with my condition. I had been putting a lot of attention on it. I had allowed it to affect have a wider effect on my consciousness and my sense of self worth, for example, right? And so I realized that I had been giving it power, that I had accepted it as as a reality, and I started. So what I did was I withdrew my attention from it. The attention I'd been focusing on it. I decided it was a condition that was rooted in a false belief, and I didn't have to accept that belief, and I began to focus on this idea of a spiritual reality. So that was sort of my introductory level of practical metaphysics in the Quimby manuscripts, and it's because of that that I began looking for, okay, is there an organization, is there a community that I can join, is there a teaching that I can find that is living today that I could be involved in. And so I did a lot of searching on different religions, what they taught, and so on and so forth. And that's how I discovered unity. And one of the primary things that appealed to me about unity initially was, as I read about it, was actually the story of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, sort of who they were as people and the path that they followed, as well as, of course, the things they came to believe. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to see if there's a local unity church or center. And as it happened, there was, and that's how I got involved in specifically in Unity to continue on this path. And so later, and so I continued to learn the teachings. I learned how to meditate in a Unity way, or to pray and meditate in a Unity way. I found this very helpful. I found it reduced my life stress. It helped me deal with different challenges that I was experiencing. Sometime later, I discovered in following Unity, I discovered something by Emmett Fox that had the golden key. I think I've talked about this in previously. I applied the golden key to a condition that I had. That it was bronchitis. My throat was swollen, and sore. I was having difficulty swallowing, and then I was trying different things. And then I thought, well, I'm going to try this golden key method. I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to contemplate, think about, reflect on deeply on everything that as Fox put it, everything that I know about God, right? Everything that I've been sort of taught about God, if you will. So I was just concentrating fully on that. And I entered into a pretty deep state of uh, meditation where I pretty much lost any sense of where I was, what I was. I can't exactly describe it. But when I sort of came out of the meditation, I guess you could say, sort of became aware of my surroundings again and that sort of thing, I also noticed shortly after that that I no longer had the condition. It was kind of like a sort of immediate healing, if you will. So these kinds of experiences convinced me that I was on the right track, that I needed to continue in following this path. And over the years, I've discovered different things about, for example, about praying with others. And what I believe to be the case is that when you're praying with others, the results, the what happens from that is dependent, at least in part, on the consciousness of the person you're praying for or with. One of the things that I found is that children and animals are less resistant, are more receptive to spiritual, mental healing. They don't have a lot of subconscious stuff built up the way that we do as adults. And I also found that it was helpful in praying for a child to pray first for the parents, to realize the presence and the peace of God in the parents, because the parents' consciousness has a strong effect on the consciousness of the child. If the parents are stressed and anxious, that's likely to spread to the child. So you kind of work with both. So this is an interesting thing to discover. Um, so over the course of time, you continue praying with others and finding again results varying to a great extent on not only what's happening in my consciousness, but what's happening in the consciousness of the people that you pray with. Another thing that I discovered in working with practical metaphysics is related to this idea of prosperity. I think probably more people are dealing more consistently or constantly with prosperity challenges, as we might call them, than they are with health challenges. Most people, right? And this is a thing that people tend to struggle with a lot. And when I first got involved in Unity, I was struggling with this prosperity, this situation where I just couldn't seem to get anywhere, couldn't seem to get ahead. And so I thought I would try some of these teachings. One of the things, interestingly, I read a pamphlet on tithing. Okay, and I thought the the pamphlet um, talked about expecting a tenfold return. So this idea of tithing was just in very simple terms is 10% of whatever you're making, right? You give to your spiritual community, your spiritual teaching. So I thought, well, I'm going to try this, even though I wasn't making very much money, and therefore the tithe was fairly small. I thought, okay, I'm going to start here, and and I recognized that it was something that was about consciousness, not just about quantity of money, for example, right? Really about expanding your spiritual consciousness. And so I started tithing, and within 2 months, I actually did have that tenfold increase. I won't go into all the details on that. So I realized that uh, what this is really about, I'll come back to the point a little bit later, but what this is really about is expanding your consciousness. It's your consciousness that attracts the supply. It's the action is a way of, you know, expressing your faith or demonstrating your consciousness. That's what it's really about. Again, I'll come back to that later. Um, I also found that was what was important for me was meditation, practicing meditation. Unity was teaching me that I could receive some kind of guidance through meditation, right? And so I tried that. Uh, much to my surprise, I might even say shock, is that as I meditated on the idea of divine wisdom and I was opening to guidance, all that kept coming to me was the idea of going into ministerial school and becoming a Unity minister. I was shocked. I thought I must be doing this wrong, but eventually I decided, okay, what I will do is I will submit an application, and if they accept me, I'll go, and if they don't, okay, then obviously I wasn't doing this right. Well, here I am today. So, long story short, and another idea that's really important to me is just a sort of continual reliance on the idea that there's an infinite source. This idea of an infinite source, that all things are possible with God, to just simply say, stay open to that truth, not necessarily always using affirmations and that sort of thing, but entering into a place where you're sort of locked into an acceptance and an expectation that this infinite spirit abundantly provides for every need at all levels. And so this has been important to me when I've sort of taken what you call a leap of faith. When I went to ministerial school, I didn't really have, I was in my 20s. I didn't have a lot of funds saved up. There were no real scholarships available. I just trusted that, okay, I'm going to find a way to make this work, right? Working part time and that sort of thing. So I went into this with this consciousness. Okay, somehow my good will come to me, right? And so later, after teaching at Unity School for about 20 years and left, when I decided to move on, put it that way, I didn't really have any particular prospect. I didn't know where I was going to go, what I was going to do. I just trusted that, okay, a way will open, a way will be provided. And that's how I ended up in New York City. Um, and when I left that position, okay, again, sort of same situation. I didn't have a particular job to go to. I just had a place to go to. We wanted to live near our children and our grandchildren. And so I figured, well, I'll figure out something to do. But the point is, all along the way, by remaining open, when the churches I was serving were having financial challenges, holding to this idea. It's very important that the minister and I believe anyway, the minister and the board especially hold to this idea, lock into this idea that we are connected to an infinite source and a way will be open. Okay. We will do what we have to do, but to keep that consciousness. And in my experience, there always has been a way open, sometimes very surprising ways, sometimes, really unexpectedly abundant supply comes in. So anyway, those are sort of some of my life experiences in a nutshell, related specifically to this idea of practical metaphysics. Practical metaphysics, of course, includes our basic teaching we call the five principles, but the thing that's practical actually are the methods. It's not just sort of these ideas, it's the methods that we use. And so I wanted to um, remind you of those methods or review those methods with you. I know that what I'm going to be talking about now at this point consists of things that you already know, that you already practice. So I'm reminding you of that in the context of, okay, this is a phase. This is the practical metaphysics phase of the unity spiritual path. So one of the things that is very important, I think, is what's called the 5-step prayer approach. The 5-step prayer approach. Now, you might not know or have memorized what those 5 steps are, but I'd be willing to bet that when you do your time of prayer meditation, you do something like this. Because this is, in effect, this teaching. And this teaching is very much like the teachings on meditation that you find in yoga and that you find in Buddhism and in other traditions. I don't think it's necessarily drawn from those other traditions. I think it's just something that came together because of what Unity teaches, because of the Fillmores and May Rowland and some other people, Francis Folks, I think especially is derived from how they talked about and taught prayer. So briefly, the 5 steps. You begin with relaxation. So when we say take a deep breath or relax and let go or peace be still, all of those are ways of getting ourselves first relaxed, starting to withdraw our attention from our stress or our problems or our conditions, or simply starting to withdraw our attention from the realm of appearances so that we can enter into the realm of a consciousness of reality. So the first step is relaxation. The second step is concentration. Okay. Concentration is simply picking something to focus on. So you begin to focus on an affirmation or a set of affirmation, or you might be focusing on a visualization. You might be simply focusing on thinking about God. Right? So concentration is that choice to begin to direct your attention and focus your attention inward on a particular idea related to spirituality. The third step is meditation, which is really a kind of natural movement or flow. As we concentrate on an affirmation, we begin to enter into the silent feeling of what it is that we're focusing on. We begin to enter into a space, if you will, mental space of openness, uh, of the Hindus call absorption into the idea. So now you're not just saying, for example, um, you know, God is love. Let's take a real simple example. Not simply repeating those words, but now you're beginning to feel them. Okay. Maybe not even using words anymore, but simply experiencing the presence of the divine as love. Example. So that's the meditation when you move from the words to into the experience. Fourth stage, fourth step, is called realization. And this is, again, simply a deeper movement. You've been feeling, you've been open. This is an experience or a stage in which you are simply knowing. You are knowing. This is the truth. This is, you are knowing the experience. You're having the realization. So, using five-step prayer for healing, for example, the realization might be simply a feeling of inner assurance that all that needs to be done is done. All that needs to be done by you is done. It's a knowing that the divine presence that heals is in that person that you're praying for or in yourself, and that the healing is now unfolding. It's realization. It's more like a knowing than anything else, a kind of inner intuitive knowing. And then the fifth stage is simply thanksgiving. Thanksgiving or feeling of gratitude helps to seal and accept the reality of the divine. As Joel Goldsmith would say, that God is on the field. That's the way he put it. You just, in effect, it's a kind of release, but it's also it's an acceptance and it's an upliftment of your consciousness during Thanksgiving. So, realization or relaxation, concentration, meditation, realization, Thanksgiving are all a flow of consciousness inward to deeper levels of spiritual awareness and acceptance. So, the five-step prayer approach is a basic process of meditation, practical metaphysics. A person who who every day reads the daily word might go through this kind of process. They read it, then they might, reflect on the ideas, the affirmation, or the spiritual teaching, and then they might go deeper. They might be still for a time in the silence, as we say. So then there's a five-step approach, and obviously this approach revolves to a certain extent about what we call affirmations, or I want to say affirmations and denials. I think denials are more important than a lot of times unity folks understand or teach. So first, affirmations. So you all know what an affirmation is. It's a positive statement of truth. So your affirmation might be something like, the one infinite spirit is the only reality, or that God is absolute good. Absolute good is the only reality. It might be something, a simple biblical phrase like all things are possible with God. Or it might be an affirmation of oneness. I am one with God and infinite good. So any kind of statement that's a positive statement of what we take to be a metaphysical truth, the spiritual truth, can be an example of something that you might focus on. So that they're affirmations. Denials are also statements, but they're statements that are, actually it's a movement of mind, right? So an affirmation we thought of as a movement, a positive movement, and a denial can be thought of as a withdrawal of thought or energy from some idea. Well, we can use statements. Their examples are given in, there's a whole chapter on it in Lessons in Truth, for example. It's really one of the best chapters, I think, on the real point of denials and what that means is found in Keep a True Lent, the chapter that's called The Philosophy of Denial. So if you've ever sort of struggled with wondering what that's about, I highly recommend that. If you get a copy of Keep a True Lent in the chapter called Philosophy of Denials. But in any case, it's fundamentally about withdrawing your attention from a condition or a situation and refocusing on positive spiritual reality. So you might start with an affirmation, move to a denial, then move back to an affirmation as a process. So an example of some denials that I like is there's no separation from God the good. There is no separation from God the good, or nothing can separate me from my good. There are no limitations in spirit, which is sort of the tails side of if you think of heads and tails on a coin, the tail side of all things are possible with God. Denial form of that would be there are no limitations in spirit. And you might use that when you're thinking in terms of limitations. You're thinking you're limited by this or that. Remind yourself there are no limitations in spirit. Or you can do something like simply hold the thought, I choose to withdraw the power of my thought from false beliefs and negativity. I choose to withdraw the power of my thought from this. This is the thing we recognize. Thought is power, or an expression of power. It's an expression of divine mind. And so whatever we focus on, we're giving power to, our thought power to. And whatever we withdraw our attention from, we're withdrawing that thought power, weakening it, dissolving the condition. Um, One of the most popular um, uses of visualization in practical metaphysics is simply sitting in stillness for a time and vividly imagining something. Most commonly, you can vividly imagine yourself, your body as radiant with divine energy and light. You can imagine feeling peace and joy and so on. You can imagine certain kinds of conditions. Probably the most common use of visualization is to achieve something, right? So visualization is used in sports psychology. It's used in sales. Um, I had a student at one time who became a unity minister who worked with an Olympic athlete who's a sports. This guy was a sports psychologist. He worked with an Olympic athlete and helped this athlete overcome some obstacles. He was the athlete was as I recall, was involved in the pentathlon, and he was struggling with high jumping, and so they used visualization to help him improve in that area, and he ended up winning a gold medal as a result of that improvement. So salespeople might visualize themselves making sales. In athletics, you might use visualization to improve your performance. I experimented with this once. I used to be in a bowling league, and I thought it'd be interesting to see if I could use visualization improve my to improve my bowling average. And kind of to my surprise, it worked. I brought my average up like 30 pins over my usual. So it can be very effective. Um, okay, well, the other two practical things that I think are very important that I want to just mention, you know about, right? Is first the law of giving and receiving. Okay? So, in order to get into a formal practice to get yourself focused on entering into this flow of this law of giving and receiving, which is again a kind of um, understanding of how consciousness works, it's often recommended that you tithe. I mentioned that was something that I did, but the percentage or how you give, what you give, whether it's of your um, whether it's of your resources, your financial resources, whether it's of your time, whether it's of your attention. It's the idea of getting into a consciousness of giving, right, of yourself, of what you have as you go through life, and to rejoice in that giving, to give joyfully. That expands your consciousness of abundance. That expands your consciousness of your ability to give. And it sets, I'm going to just use a naturalistic analogy that I know is a little bit simplistic, but it makes your mind a magnet to attract good. as you give from this consciousness of abundance, you expand your consciousness of abundance, and it is that consciousness that then attracts sort of manifestations of abundance. So I think um, this is an important practical metaphysical teaching. It's important because it works, right? It helps to reinforce our conviction and our dedication to applying these principles. When we see that in giving we can see the return, it's important to be aware of when that return comes, but begin to be more confident, more conscious of the abundance of the universe, and that releases stress, and there's all kinds of positive benefits to it. So it's a thing to consider. Okay, what do I uh, what do I feel confident about giving? What is my what consciousness? And maybe push a little bit beyond what you feel confident about, and sort of, as they say, um, have a little bit more faith in what your source and in your abundance. And then the final one that I want to just mention is forgiveness. And of course, forgiveness is a very important teaching. We know that when we are holding feelings of anger or resentment towards someone for something that we perceive them as having done against us, in holding those negative feelings and resentment, we have absolutely no effect on the other person. It only affects us. So forgiveness is this practice of releasing, of focus, of moving your consciousness into a consciousness of love and release, so that this this energy sets you free. Uh, Simply remembering again, I go to a teaching of Jesus: forgive and you will be forgiven. So remember, as I forgive, I am forgiven. Why? Because this is divine law. You are releasing something that you don't need. You're releasing those feelings of negativity. Doesn't mean you necessarily stop pursuing justice. But if you are seeking what you think of as justice from a place of anger, that's not really justice at all. That's about vengeance. That's about revenge. And then consequently, you're sowing and increasing the enmity of vengeance in the world. So you can you can forgive and seek justice, but you can seek that justice from a place of inner peace and love. It sounds paradoxical only because it is. So, um, I know that I've talked a little bit about my path by way of illustration, and I'm sure all of you have stories of things. If you think back on it, you have stories of things that, oh, truth works, right? Or this was a demonstration that was important to me. It's important to keep remembering those, especially if you start feeling stuck or not making progress. Just go back in your memory and remember how you got into unity, the things that you did that had an impact on your life. So to summarize, this is whatever else I may or may not know about you. This I believe to be true. This I know to be true. That you are, each of you are connected to and part of one infinite spirit, being, mind, life that we call God. God is absolute good, and you are one with that good, always in all circumstances. You have access to infinite possibilities, the infinite possibilities of the infinite mind. Whatever you focus your attention on, that you experience and that you express. And you have the power to withdraw your thought from unwanted conditions, and by doing so, diminish those conditions, cause them to dissolve. You can express and experience any possibility that you can accept as yours. And in this way, you have the power to increase the flow of all good into your life. We call this the law of mind action. The good you seek is already within you as the divine presence and divine possibilities. So be open to your good. Focus your thoughts and actions on expressing that good, and your good will manifest in you and through you. You are here by the intention of the infinite one, God. Good. This is not an accident. You are intentionally here. And the infinite one, the whole universe, supports you in expressing the divinity that you are. Trust that, do that, trust that, and do what is yours to do, because the good you are seeking is seeking you. Thank you.